some closing thoughts and comments about
Sure.
our wonderful, brilliant panelists here.
Thank you, colleagues. I really enjoy your contributions. I think I agree with everything that has been said. When I think about change, change is hard. We all know that, even in our own lives. Changing habits, think about that. I mean, it takes forever. When I look at the bright spots, when you see good change happening, one common thread is that leadership matters. So we're talking about changing school cultures in which the leader of the school sets the tone for a culture of risk-taking. Even the very categories we use, it's very easy to run into the conclusion that certain dual language learners don't have a language. We heard that. That was pretty common. The LA Times covered this 20 years ago, that these kids were not proficient in English or their first language. So they are semi-lingual. They are the non-nuns was the term they used in that article. So this culture should be open to question, to take the risk to question the very categories that are being used all the time. And when it comes, why? Because sometimes we try to endorse an asset-oriented and affirming approach to education for these students. And our notion of asset might be very different from what these communities consider when you ask them. And we have to think about that. So evidence and analysis of evidence is critical. Data systems is huge, and we need to be proficient in understanding the data sources. But keep in mind that those data only give you a partial understanding of kids' experiences. And so things like code switching and translanguaging are not going to be most likely in those data systems. And they may be a huge asset that you may want to consider. And so to build from what Dr. Estrada mentioned, engaging with evidence is huge. But we need to think about how do we bring cultures, how do we build cultures in which we take risks and curate, prepare each other, all the professionals in the school, to curate the sources of evidence so that we are not only drawing from the dashboard or whatever system might be in place, but also from whatever communities and families and students may show us and teach us every day. There are beautiful efforts in Los Angeles to look at indigenous groups from Latin America. They're producing children's books. They're producing narratives of immigration from the perspective of mujeres Zacatecas that might differ from the experience of all the rest of Mexican narratives of immigration. You may find assets in those narratives. And so the idea of risk-taking with the leader pushing and making it okay to have the opportunity to become what sociologists call institutional agents. What if we think about our silos in more permeable ways along the lines of what we're hearing about modeling? What if we begin to cross-fertilize the perspective of what's happening in bilingual education to benefit from the expertise of special educators and the other way around? But schedules and silos don't always allow that. So what is the culture that will allow us to do that? That's what we're talking about, to really question traditional categories, to change organizational structures, to take risks, and to think what can we bring to the picture that is in front of us just by looking at the students and listening to them and the families. The websites are there, the communities are there. We can definitely begin to wonder what does that mean to be proficient in that language, the way they think about it. To be Mayan in Los Angeles is very different from being Maya in Huehuetenango, Guatemala. What is the distance? What does that mean? Does that mean that they are less Mayan now? No, they're just redefining it. So that's the kind of culture that we want to be building in that sense. There are two great books that actually map the journey for school change, district change actually. One is Maria Hernandez at NYU, Dismantling Disproportionality. She worked for over 10 years in the state of New York, engaging districts in reconceptualizing ability, sometimes with language, and addressing disproportionality from a systemic perspective. In that book, you have a whole roadmap and the experiences narrated, and a new one. And these two books are published in a series that I published in Teachers College Press. The second one is Kathleen King Torios is just publishing a book recently. I will make these resources available so you have it. UCLA has a beautiful community map website where you can find indigenous groups, That's a group that is completely relegated from discussions of second language and dual language learners.
That is true.
You can look at the community maps in Los Angeles of indigenous groups. The same for undocumented learners that have a very different experience, and yet they are under the same category of data systems. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Please join me in thanking our panelists.